All right. So this first question here, it says, which statement provides the best explanation for the difference in biomass of organisms found at each trophic level? So you need to know that biomass just means living stuff. That's in the hint up here. If I take all the living stuff and I put it together and I put it on a scale, that's biomass, to see how much living stuff there is, okay? Living stuff needs energy. Less energy means less living stuff, means less biomass. So we know that these energy levels, you remember the trophic levels, it's an energy pyramid, right? The largest amount of energy that's available is at the bottom, and as you go up, it gets smaller, smaller, smaller. So the amount of energy in these different trophic levels goes down as you go up. Because the energy goes down, the amount of living stuff also goes down as you go up in trophic levels. In other words, the number of rabbits will be less than, or the biomass of rabbits, how much all the rabbits weigh, will be less than how much all the grass weighs. If you take all the snakes and put them together, that will be less than all the rabbits. If you take all the hawks, put them together, that would be less than the snakes. Because the energy goes down as you go up in levels, so does the amount of living stuff, which we call biomass. There's only one answer that mentions what I just said. Which statement provides the best explanation for the difference in biomass that's found at different levels? Well, there's less energy available in those levels in the higher levels, right? So what's the answer there? I'll let you tell me. No, it's not that one. Organisms at higher trophic levels have less energy available to them than the ones at the lower. That's why there's less living stuff up there. All right. Which statement explains the most likely consequence of having a low genetic diversity on the cheetah population? So what you need to know is that low diversity means low resilience. That's in the hint up here. Low diversity is low resilience. High diversity is high resilience. If I have a field of just corn, that's a low diversity, right? That's not many different living things together. If a bug that eats corn, a swarm of them come in, that entire field will be destroyed. But if I have corn mixed in with 100 different plants, that's a high diversity. A bug comes in that eats corn, sure, the corn is eaten, but you got 100 other plants that are still just fine. And the ecosystem as a whole is still okay. So low diversity is like putting all your eggs in one basket. It's very risky because it only takes one thing to come in and wipe you out. So what would be the most likely consequence of having a low diversity in the cheetah population? Well, they're at risk for having something come in and wipe them out. Which answer do you think it is? Correct. It is H. All right. All right. How can scientists use this technique to control gene expression? What technique are we talking about? Well, we have to go back and read. It says that it uses this technique. It's a genetic modification technique called CRISPR that edits parts of the genome of an organism. Using this technique, scientists can add, remove, or modify sections of the DNA sequence. How can you control gene expression? Well, what is gene expression? Gene expression, it's right here in the hint. Gene expression is turning genes on or off. So the question literally gives you the answer here, because it's saying, how can scientists use this technique to control gene expression, which means turning genes on and off? The answer is just saying the same thing in a different way. That is correct, Daniel. By activating or deactivating specific genes. That's saying the same thing as turning genes on and off. Okay. During secondary succession, which of these best describes why decomposing pioneer plants give way to larger, more complex plant species, such as hardwood trees? So as a friendly reminder of what primary and secondary succession are, this is primary succession over here on the left. Remember, primary is when you go from nothing to something, or in other words, bare rock to something, to small, early plant life. That's still kind of sparse, right? Secondary succession is when other things move in and take over that area, like maybe this thing burns down, maybe a flood wipes out all this stuff, and then new stuff grows in its place afterward. And that's secondary succession, when it's taken over where something used to be before. Okay. So why do decomposing pioneer plants give way to larger, more complex plant species, such as hardwood trees? Here's a hint. Dead stuff eventually becomes soil. So everything that dies, plants and animals, they all get broken down and decomposed, and they become part of the earth, and they become soil. So in secondary succession, all the stuff that died in primary succession in the first go around, all that stuff that used to be there that died is now part of the soil, so you have more soil. If you have more and thicker soil, you can grow larger plants, because larger plants need big, deep roots, so they need thick soil. So which answer choice says that? Correct. Increased amounts of soil from decomposing pioneer species allow plants with more extensive root systems to become established. Or in other words, there's more soil, so you can have bigger plants. All right, you guys probably remember this picture, don't you? With the millipede and the ant. So the millipede turns around, he flexes his muscles, and he wipes these tufts of hair all over the ant, and they stick to the ant, and they get tangled up in the ant, and it kind of just distracts the ant long enough for the millipede to run away. So what two systems are interacting to help the ant? So flexing, they tell you the word flex. It says, you need to look for keywords. Remember, anytime you have a question about body systems, you're going to have to look for keywords to find out what systems we're talking about. One of the keywords mentioned in here is flex. And you know these tufts are made of hair. So flex and hair. Flex sounds like, what do you flex? Muscles, right? I don't know why I can't zoom in on the muscle part, but yeah, you flex your muscles. So we know the muscular system is being involved. And what other system involves your hair? Right next to it, integumentary, hair, skin, nails. So those two systems, the muscular system and the integumentary system, are working together in this situation here. Okay, here's a pedigree. A pedigree is just a family tree. Squares are boys, circles are girls. So this is dad and mom. Number 1 is dad, number 2 is mom. This Roman numeral number 1 over here is for first generation. This Roman numeral 2 is the second generation. Second generation is like their kids. Third generation is their kids. Okay. So we got mom and dad, and they have 5 kids, I'm sorry. This is how pedigrees work. You have one, you just follow the line, they mate, and then they have baby number 1. 1 is their baby, 3 is their baby, 5 is one of their babies, 6 is one of their babies, and 8 is one of their babies. So number 1, was this a male or female? It's a square. Squares are boys, circles are girls. So this is their son, and their son married mated with a lady, and they had 2 kids. And another son mated with a lady, and they had 3 kids. This daughter never got married. This daughter never got married, I guess. And this daughter married a guy, and they had 4 kids, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's how pedigrees work. You don't need to know all that. I'm just telling you what you're looking at. The question is, based on this pedigree, what are the most likely genotypes of individuals I1 and I2? Well, we don't have enough information, so we got to go back and read. It says the inheritance pattern for a trait, a dominant trait, is shown in the pedigree. Shaded symbols represent individuals with the dominant trait. So remember, dominant trait is the capital letter. So it's going to be big A, either big A, or big A, little a. It just means that if you're dark, you have a big A. You have at least one big A in your genotype. It could be big A, or big A, little a. So they're wanting you to know, or they're wanting you to find out, what are the genotypes of individuals I1 and I2? That's right here. I1 and I2. Basically the first 2. What are their, we know that number 1 is going to be either big A, or big A, little a. So which 2 can we rule out automatically? Because we know I1 should have at least a big A. So if I1 doesn't have at least one big A, we know that can't be the right answer. We can rule out J, and we can rule out F. So it's going to be either G or H. Now the question is I1 big A, and I2 heterozygous? Or is I1 heterozygous and I2 is homozygous recessive? Remember, what does, this is common sense now. What does I2, or the mother, what color would she be if she had a big A? Remember, if you have the dominant trait, you're going to be shaded darker, right? Is she shaded darker? No, so she must not have the dominant letter. So if she doesn't have the dominant letter, what must I2, or the mother, be? Right, little a. So the only possible answer is H. All right. When cells lose their ability to regulate the cell cycle, they can divide at an accelerated rate and form a mass of cells. This mass of cells is referred to as a, you guys remember what this is? You remember when cells make copies of themselves? They're supposed to stop, because if they don't stop, they go out of control and they form this big thing. It starts with a T. You guys remember what that's called? It's one of the answer choices. It's the only one that starts with a T. I just told you what it is. It's a tumor. And this is a tumor. So when cells can't stop multiplying, they turn into a tumor like that. And that ends up sucking all of the nutrients away from all the healthy cells around it and kills all the healthy cells around it. And the cancer gets bigger and bigger and kills more and more healthy cells. And we know what happens if it does not stop. Which type of mutation does the model demonstrate? So we're just going to use common sense here. What does it look like we're doing here? We got this DNA sequence that's made up of GCATs, right? And we're taking this section of DNA and we're just shoving it into somewhere before, like between these two letters here, between these two bases. Does that sound like it's a deletion, an insertion, a substitution, or a translocation? It's just another word for taking something and putting it in somewhere. A substitution would be a swap. It would be if we take one thing and replace it with another. We're not replacing something. We're adding something new into a place where it should not be. Correct. Insertion. Yes. We're inserting a DNA sequence into a place where it does not belong. A deletion would be if we deleted a letter, like if we took out this C or we deleted a G, that would be a deletion. Substitution would be like if we replaced C with a G or C with a T. Or translocation would be like if we took a whole section from here and we moved it over here and took that section and moved it back over there. It's like if we swapped two places out. So there's different kinds of mutations. I'm not sure which one's going to be asked on the STAAR test, but the names pretty much, if you know what deletion, insertion, substitution, if you know what those words mean, they're very self-explanatory. Okay, based on this information, which statement correctly describes the relationship between the two populations of tree frogs? What information? We got to go back. A zoo acquired male and female tree frogs from two different populations. In the zoo, the tree frogs were able to successfully mate within their own population, but they could not breed between the two populations. So the frogs could not, they could only breed with frogs that were in their same little group. They could not breed with frogs from the other group. So if you can't breed with other organisms, then that means that you are a different what? You're a different species. That's what the definition of a different species is. You become a different species. If there were humans that could not breed with other humans and make babies that could make babies, then those people would be a different species of people. And on Earth, in Earth's history, there actually were different species of people living on Earth at the same time. Today, we only have one species of person, but in the past, we've had as many as 2 or 3, I think, living on Earth at the same time that we know of. And they could not breed with each other, right? So that's what it means. They're a different species. So just find the answer that says different species. All right, which statement best explains the increase in the heart rate and breathing rate during exercise? In other words, why does your heart beat faster and why do you breathe heavier when you're exercising? Here's a hint. Oxygen is needed for your body to make ATP. You guys remember the mitochondria? The job from yesterday, the job of the mitochondria is to make ATP, which is energy. ATP is energy, same thing. Don't forget that. And the mitochondria needs oxygen to make the energy. So if you're spending a lot of energy exercising, you have to make more to replace it. What do you need to make more? You need oxygen. How do you get oxygen? You breathe heavier. So which one says that? Which one says that? Which answer choice? Correct. Body cells require increased oxygen as energy is expended. We need the oxygen so we can make ATP, which is just energy. Which pathogen is most likely responsible for causing hoof and mouth disease in livestock? Well, we got to go back and read. Blah, 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 blah. They found that it was caused by a microscopic infectious particle. It was discovered that this particle requires a host cell to reproduce. What type of particle requires a host cell to reproduce? First of all, the answer, again, the answer is in the question. If you read this part right here, requires a host cell to reproduce. Look at the answer choices. Is there one of them that mentions because it requires a host cell to reproduce? Yes. Which one is it? It's D. It is a virus. Viruses do require a host cell to reproduce. They cannot reproduce on their own. They're not a living thing. Remember, viruses are not living things. They're not considered alive. They're just things that spread. But they need a host cell to spread. Okay. Oops. All right. Based on the two diagrams, which list correctly identifies the relationships that this wasp larvae, don't even worry about trying to say that word, that the wasp larvae have with other organisms? Well, where are the wasp larvae? Here's the wasp larvae right here. Remember, the arrow always points toward the eater, right? Or the consumer. In this case, the wasp isn't actually the eater. If you look over here, the life cycle of the wasp, it's actually a parasite. This wasp lays eggs inside of a caterpillar, and the eggs hatch inside the caterpillar, and the little baby wasp larvae crawl out of the caterpillar and feed off of it before they turn into adult wasps. So they're actually parasitic to the caterpillar. Okay, so these moth caterpillars, they have a parasitic relationship with them. What type of relationship do these wasps have with stink bugs? What is the relationship between the stink bug and the moth caterpillar? Right, they are the eaters of the moth caterpillar. So if they eat the moth caterpillar and the wasps also use and eat and parasitize the moth caterpillar, then what relationship do the wasp and the stink bug have with each other? They both use the same resource. So if two things use the same resource, what type of relationship is that? Competition, correct. So you're just looking for the answer choice that says that they have a competition relationship with stink bugs and a parasitic relationship with the moths. All right. Which of these is most likely to happen over a few generations? We got to go back and read. This is a question that we recently had on our evolution section. You remember when we talked about how male guppies, if they're in an area with predators, they're not colorful because they don't want to stand out and get eaten? Because if you stand out, you're going to be more noticeable, and if you're more noticeable, you're going to get eaten more. So if they're in areas with predators, they're not colorful. But if they're in areas where there are not predators, then they are colorful because they can be. So if you take some adult guppies from an area with predators, in other words, ones that don't have color, and put them into an area with few predators, with fish that do have color, then what's going to happen? So now they're in this new place with colorful fish and less predators. Would the mortality rate of the guppies go up? Would the death rate go up? No. They're in an area with less predators. That would not go up. Offspring will stop competing for resources? Of course not. There will be an increase in mutations in the offspring. We can't say that for sure. There will be an increase in the number of colorful guppies. Yes. What natural processes are the biologists attempting to imitate? Well, let's go back and see what they're doing. Wildlife biologists often recommend purposely starting fires called prescribed burns, which are monitored and controlled in grassland ecosystems every 3 to 4 years. These biologists observe greater diversity in plant and animal life in the years following a prescribed burn. So they burn these fields on purpose every 3 to 4 years because it's actually healthy for the fields to burn every 3 to 4 years. What natural processes are the biologists attempting to imitate? So what natural process describes a field burning and then new stuff coming in and growing and taking its place? Correct. It is succession. Remember succession, primary succession, and then if that stuff were to burn down or a flood came in and ruined it and new stuff came in and grew in its place, that's succession, right? Which system interactions are dependent on the plant's ability to respond to the direction of light? Which system interactions are dependent on the plant's ability to respond to light? Okay, well, here's a hint. There's no sunlight underground. Duh, right? So we can automatically rule out the systems that are underground. We're looking for system interactions that have to do with detecting light. Why would root systems that are underground have anything to do with detecting light? There's no light underground. So we can automatically rule out option 1 and option 3. So it's going to be either option 2 or option 4. Option 2 says seed dispersal and absorption of CO2. Does that sound like it involves detecting sunlight? Not really, but let's read 4. 4 says photosynthesis and food transport. Well, we know photosynthesis. That's how plants make their food from sunlight, right? So I think the answer is pretty clear there. And the word photo actually means light. Like a photograph is a light graph. Okay. Which statement best explains why people with cancer due to asbestos exposure do not pass the mutation on to their offspring? In order to know this, you have to know what's in the hint here, which is only DNA in gametic cells, sperm and eggs. Those are the gametic cells, sperm and eggs, gets passed to offspring. Doesn't that make sense? Because the sperm and the egg are the first 2 cells that when they join together make a baby. So obviously the only DNA that the baby can have is whatever DNA is in the sperm and whatever DNA is in the egg combined. If there's no mutation, if there's no mutant DNA in the sperm or egg, the baby won't get it. So why do people with cancer due to asbestos not pass it on to their offspring? Because it's not in the gametic cells. Or in other words, so we can rule out F. H and J have nothing to do with it. It is G, the mutation occurred in somatic cells. You were right, Daniel. So somatic just means every other cell that's not a sperm or egg cell. So your hair cells, skin cells, liver cells, all those cells are somatic cells. The only cells that aren't are the gametic cells, which are sperm and eggs. Everything else is a somatic cell. In case you were wondering, which of these components are found in the cells of all living organisms? Here's a hint. The only thing found in all living cells is DNA. So DNA is not an option though, is it? But what is DNA made up of? Yeah. GCAT, right? GCAT. G stands for guanine, C stands for cytosine. A is adenine, T is thymine. These are the G and the C of GCAT that make up DNA. All right. Almost there. Based on this diagram, which two systems interact to maintain homeostasis? Homeostasis is the Goldilocks zone, right? It's that state of your body being just right. Not too much blood sugar, not too little blood sugar. Blood glucose is just blood sugar. So like whenever, someone who has diabetes is worried about their blood sugar, this is what we're talking about. Your body normally regulates your blood sugar level. If it gets too high, it brings it down low. If it gets too low, it brings it back up high. That's to keep it at a stable or Goldilocks state that we call homeostasis. So what two systems are interacting to maintain your blood glucose level? Well, we know that the blood is the main thing involved here, right? Blood glucose. And what system involves your blood and your blood vessels? Cardiovascular, right? Blood vessels, blood transport. All right, so let's, just from knowing what blood means, what system blood is involved in, which ones can we rule out? We can rule out all the ones that do not include blood or the circulatory system. So which ones do not include circulatory system as an answer? Yep, F does not and H does not. But G and J do. So does it sound like it's an endocrine working with your bloodstream, or does it sound like the immune system working? Does your immune system have anything to do with blood sugar? No, your immune system, remember, is your white blood cells. They protect you from getting sick. This has nothing to do with that. So we can rule that out, leaving us with only one logical answer, which must be G. And also, if you read G, it says keeping blood sugar levels constant, which is what we're doing. Again, you don't have to be an expert. Just start with one thing, use that to rule out two answers. The other two you can figure out based on logic. Which role of protists has the most positive effect on maintaining the plant population in an ecosystem? Even if you don't know what protists are, don't freak out. You might read that question and not know what a protist is and then freak out because you don't know what a protist is and then just give up. But don't, because we're talking about what is going to have a positive effect on plants. So just find the answer choice that talks about a positive effect on plants. And if there's more than one answer choice that mentions a positive effect on plants, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. How many answer choices mention something, doing something, or something happening that would be good for plants? A says it's a major food source for animals. That's a good thing for animals, not plants. Protists produce approximately 75% of oxygen on Earth. Do plants need oxygen? They make it as a waste product, but do they breathe it in? No. So oxygen would not help plants. Protists decompose dead materials, returning nutrients to the soil. Do plants need nutrients in the soil? Yes. And D says something about being found in the gut of animals. We're not talking about animals, we're talking about plants. So the obvious answer must be C. Again, you didn't have to know what a protist was to get that answer. You just had to use common sense and look for what was good for plants. Okay. Which list correctly matches the functions to the types of carbohydrates? So we have energy function and structure function, and then they have two carbs listed next to it. And there's descriptions up here. So when you think structure, you should think of like a building, and that's the hint. Walls make up the structure. So the structure of a house is made up of, it's the walls, right? All the wood in the walls is the structure. So which one of these descriptions sounds like it's talking about building the structure of a cell? Cellulose says it's a major component of plant cell walls. Aren't cell walls part of the structure of the cell? Just like walls are part of the structure of a house? Yes. Chitin, a major component of fungal cell walls. Again, both of these are used for structure in building walls, which makes the structure of the cell. So we know that structure is going to be these two. Which answer choice can we rule out because oh crap, I just showed you the answer. Sorry. I hate when I do that. Anyway, you just saw it. But structure is gonna, the correct answer should say structure is cellulose and chitin. How many say the structure is cellulose and chitin? Only one, and that is F. And that's the ball game.